Welcome to Gracefully Graying Livestream. Gracefully Graying is a startup to connect you to resources and information about growing older and for assisting your loved ones. We provide articles, interviews, checklists, and other tips to create a productive and vibrant life. We also have many resources for people moving into later life stages and how they can be helped by those around them. You can find us on gracefullygraying.com and social media platforms. So now enjoy the live stream Gracefully Graying show.
Welcome to Gracefully Graying. I'm your host, Attorney Henry Gornbein. Today on Gracefully Graying, we are going to be exploring a very important topic with my guest, Alyssa Tobias, as we discuss senior residences, what they mean, what the levels are, and when is it time to move into one? Alyssa, welcome to Gracefully Graying.
Thank you for having me, Henry. It's a pleasure to be here.
First of all, tell us a little bit about your background and areas of expertise.
Perfect. Wonderful. Well, I have been a geriatric social worker for the last 25 years. I graduated from the University of Michigan School of Social Work, Go Blue, which is still the #1 program in the country since 1995. Had to give that plug right there. And since then, I have worked in every facet of the geriatric world. So I started off my career at the JCC before I went to graduate school and worked as a programmer. And then that motivated me, since I've always loved seniors, to get my degree. And then it was full blown into Hospice of Michigan. I worked in skilled care. I ran Menorah House when that was up and running on 11 in Greenfield. I have worked at the Trowbridge. I was their first social worker ever. I worked for the Alzheimer's Association, and I've done every variety you can do in this field. So I'm pretty well versed in the last 25 years.
You know, as an aside, my mother, Reva Gornbein, who passed away at 100, she used to teach bridge at Trowbridge when she was in her 90s. So I don't know if you were there back.
I was there. I started in 97, and I took care of a lot of people's grandmas and grandpas. It was such an honor and a privilege. I learned so much about history from working with this population, which is my favorite in the entire universe.
I'm going to personalize this. I live in a multi-level condominium. We live in a beautiful setting. Our friends are now in the process of either downsizing or looking for housing with first floor master bedrooms, ranch houses perhaps, but clearly condos or other types of units. The market is such where there's very little of that available. So what are the reasons for someone to consider moving into senior housing?
Well, there's a variety, and you mentioned the first one, stairs. Anything that's an obstacle physically as we age is going to be a real big predicament in the future. So we want to think about those things that, for those people who have arthritis, as we age, most people in my community use a walker because they're over a certain age. So we want to make sure we're moving to an area that's appropriate for our lifestyle. So if you are looking, if people are in the range anywhere between 65 and 80 is when people are really making that transition. The problem is there is a stigma attached with making that transition. So I try to educate people on their choices and what kind of senior housing would be best for each person's personality and lifestyle.
Important issues. Average ages. I mean, it's interesting in Florida, 55 and older are considered senior communities. It's a different lifestyle. We don't have...
Completely different. And that's really important to understand because in Florida, as you said, 55 and up to like 70, 75 is retirement community. People are living in condos on the golf course. They're living in communities with pools. That is the idea of retirement. That's what my people here called their golden years. Once we have passed 75 and we need alternative living, we are looking at places that have transitional care so that if you are looking for a community setting, there are those available. If you're looking for a buy-in setting, if that's what you choose, I tell people to be very cautious about that because as you age, you're not going to make return on your investment. If you are looking just to age in place, I tell people areas, again, to find ranch housing, but I don't recommend people after the age of 80 something years old living by themselves, because we need companionship and we need to thrive in order to live. And being lonely sets depression in and all other kinds of things. So we really want to nip that in the bud and find out how we're going to age, where we're going to go, and what's the best place for someone who's really looking for that.
Tell us about the options for senior housing that are available.
So if you Google, on the Google machine, as I call it, you go on there and you plug in senior housing, there are so many options, it's overwhelming. So the first thing you want to think about is where you are in your lifestyle now. Are you looking for a physical move that's completely in an independent community that really just offers you some food and companionship? There are places like that. I happen to work in a place that offers all three. We are called a continuum of care. So if you're looking to retire and you're looking for an apartment, whether it be a 1 or a 2 bedroom, which are full functioning apartments, this is a lifestyle. You're buying into a lifestyle. If you are looking for something that requires more care, but you want to be independent because your needs are more physical, let's hypothetically say you're using a walker or you're on a lot of medication and you need a little more assistance to help you live independently because you can't live on your own to do these things by yourself, assisted living might be an option. That goes with an assessment from a nurse or a social worker to see where their level of care is. Once we're at the point where our memory is impaired, we have to start looking at other options for that. So we really have to look at where we are in the aging process, where someone is looking to move, and then we navigate the journey from that point forward.
Okay, I'm going to start with the independent living, which you offer, of course.
Yes.
What are the facilities? What is it like?
So let me give you a day in the life of someone here. I work at Waltonwood in 12 Oaks. So, and I really recommend wherever you live, it doesn't matter. Living in a community is a beautiful thing. And there is a stigma, so I'm going to destigmatize it right now. When people come into my community and they tour, they're clearly very scared and nervous because they feel like they're being put somewhere, which is not the case at all. A day in the life here is we offer breakfast, and you come down and you have breakfast and coffee and Danish or whatever you want with your friends. It's very low key. And we offer activities all day long. You don't have to participate, or you can participate. So what we try to do is gear our lifestyle towards our active senior. We also provide transportation because as we age and we're independent, we know that driving can be an issue, and we want to give alternative resources to people so that they can be more independent in their lifestyle. So here we have breakfast, we have activities, and then we have things going on throughout the day. Some people partake in a lot of things, some people partake in nothing. But the big thing here, I think, for most people when they live in a community is dinner. And the reason being is no matter what you do, people have to eat dinner. And that is a place of community for where most people here have that relationship. And that's where people form their bonds and how they get their quote unquote friend groups as they age, because loneliness and depression is real. And we want to really navigate the journey to get people there before that even happens.
What are typical costs for someone who's independently living still?
You know, and this is where we get into that crazy, how do we afford to age? Because this is what's happening. So I happen to run a retirement community that's on a higher price point scale. So senior livings can start anywhere, and this is going to sound crazy, but probably starting lowest in an independent living situation, anywhere probably between $1,800 to $2,200 on the lower end for independent living. And as you get into more amenities and a more luxury lifestyle, you're looking at starting somewhere at around the $3,000 range. And I don't think people realize that navigating your money situation is overwhelming in its own right. But I also say the pros of that is your lifestyle is encompassed in that package, so to speak. So your meals other than lunch in an independent living situation is taken care of. And because we don't provide lunch, we have a cafe. So most independent living communities have space on site where you can purchase some kind of lunch, because what we want to do is make it inclusive so that you feel like you can live your best life. If you don't leave and you don't drive, we make it available here. We have a beauty shop on site. We have a gym on site. So we have a trainer on site. We do these things so that people can live their same lifestyle that they're doing in their home now, but we just make it that much easier. So independent living is like the Love Boat on land, is what I like to say.
And what activities? I mean, I think of people playing perhaps bridge, mahjong, other cards.
Stuff. So those all things are resident run, because my residents are very independent. So at night or during the day, there is bridge, there's canasta, there's mahjong, there's hand and foot. I didn't even know what that was. There's some domino game that I keep saying the wrong name of, Mexican train, and I called it dominoes and almost got ostracized from the community. So they all have their games. That's just one component. During the day, we have ongoing activities. So today is Wednesday, so we have wine and cheese today, and we offer very simple programming, entertainment. We have that at least once a week. That's what you're buying into. You're buying into a lifestyle to keep you young and keep your brain young so that you're not lonely, because loneliness as we age is a huge problem, and we want to prevent that before it becomes an issue. And a lot of people move to communities after they lose a loved one. So that's another advantage to being a part of a community, because of that loneliness factor.
What about things like exercise facilities, pools, tennis courts, pickleball courts, which has become one of the hottest things now?
Yeah, I just heard about that. So here we do not have a pool, but some of our communities do. It depends on the size. As far as the sports stuff, they don't do as much of that, but my residents go out to do that. I have residents that go swimming. They go and do their physical activities, quote unquote, out of the building. But as far as anything gaming sorts or lunch and learns or big events, we're very big on bringing, unfortunately not during COVID, but we have been opening up and we bring our families in. We have big programming around the holidays because it's important for intergenerational activities to happen. It's very important to involve our families and that they're involved with their loved ones. That's part of the aging process.
Alyssa, now let's go to those who have some mobility issues, need some type of help. Tell us about that.
So there's a lot of options for people who need help. And starting on the most minimal scale, in independent livings, there are supplemental services. So if you are able to live independently and you have all of your cognition and you just have some physical ailments, you can live independently with alternative services. But when we need a little bit more, we have assisted living. And I tried defining these living situations so people really understand and they don't make the wrong choice, because we have to educate in order to know. So assisted living is living independently with perks. You're going to live in an apartment, but you're not going to have a full kitchen. You're going to have a kitchenette. And why? Because we have impairment now and we don't want to have safety hazards. So we have a kitchenette, we don't have a stove. We have larger apartments with spaces that are more equipped to handle wheelchairs, walkers, which is what most people use as they age. So we want to make their independence as easy as possible. So in assisted living, there's 3 meals a day and there's a care plan. So each person would be assessed by a nurse to see where that level of care would be. And that is how it is dictated pricing wise, because it is very, very expensive to age. So we want to make sure, A, you're placed appropriately, whether you need to be independent or assisted. And if that assessment goes not in the right direction and someone might be more cognitively impaired, they might be more apt to be in memory care. Memory care is a much more secured situation where it's much smaller. And that is when we have basically a diagnosis under the dementia hub, where we've gotten to the point where we can no longer perform our activity of daily living, our ADLs, where we need assistance basically with everything in queuing. And again, memory care, everything that we do in the senior world is to preserve dignity. No matter what level of aging we are at, that's where it's at. We want to give everyone the aging experience that they can age with grace and dignity.
Alyssa, costs,
Huh.
assisted living, I mean, just Ballpark.
Ballpark. So
About 5,000 to
on the lowest end, and I'm going to be honest, I think we're looking between 35 and 4,000 on a lower end, and depending on what your level of care is. So if you're someone who's just cognitively impaired and you need cueing, and someone comes in and says, hey, Mr. Jones, here's your outfit for the day, and you need cueing with that, or you need cueing for toileting or showering or shower assists, that would be on the lower level. You can be in assisted living on a lower level, and then it goes up with care. So some people are in scooters, some people are in wheelchairs, some people need a lot more physical care, but their cognition is wonderful. So what we do is we come up with a care plan, and that can range into the $7,000-8,000. And once we get into memory care, we're looking even higher, around the $10,000 mark.
And what about, it's hard to get, I happen to have it, but now it's almost impossible to get long-term care insurance. How does that?
Wow, that is an amazing question. And what I'm going to tell everyone who's listening now is you get that insurance when you're younger than me, and I'm 54. Because what's going to happen is I'm no longer eligible because I have a pre-existing condition that I didn't even know would be a pre-existing condition. So when you're in your 30s and 40s, I'm telling you, buy into it now, because if you have that long-term care insurance, it kicks in for supplemental financial reasons, and it helps so much. I have people that have quality of life that no longer would be able to if they didn't have that. So first thing, when you're younger, go and get that insurance. You have to do that at a younger age, because what's going to happen is if you're over the age of 65, and like most of us, whether we have arthritis or we have hypertension or whatever, something's going to X us out of not getting that long-term care. They find a reason, believe me. So start young, and when you don't, that's where we have to start talking to families about our finances, having these conversations very early on, because aging is very expensive, and we don't know that till we get there. And no one knows that until they have an aging parent or loved one to actually know what the financial situation is. We don't live our life planning for that. We plan for everything else. We plan for retirement, but we don't plan to age. And there's a very big difference. So we plan to send our kids away to school. We plan when we have children, when we get married. But what we don't plan for is the most essential thing, is when we age, and aging until we die. So these are the realities we have to deal with, because it is expensive. And how are we going to pay for this in about 10 years?
And people don't like to discuss this. They don't like to face this. These are some of the hardest conversations. So how do you have this conversation with a family?
You know, they are the hardest conversations to have. And I think a lot of families are truthfully afraid. They are afraid to have the honest conversation because they're afraid they're going to hurt their family members' feelings. They're afraid they're going to get mad. Well, we love our families, and sometimes they're going to get mad when they hear the honest truth, but they will respect us in the long run. As soon as we see some cognitive impairment, and we see those, whether it be losing keys, forgetting things, appointments, we're going to sit our family down, have a small family meeting, and say, you know, you've told us, mom, dad, auntie, whoever, that you've been forgetful, and we love you, and we're concerned, and we want to talk about, not now, but we start having these conversations very early on. We want to talk now about making a move. Well, you say the word move, and everything goes to hell in a handbasket, but we have to get that out there, and then we start telling them why. And then after we have that conversation, if they're not ready to look at some of these communities that are out there, we as family members really have to start doing the research ourselves, because our family members are not going to do it, because they're going to be in denial and say, I don't have to move. So it's really on us in our young 40s and early 50s to start investigating what our family member wants before they need it. And nobody tells us that because we don't know.
What, Alyssa, should someone look for in placing a loved one in senior housing? And I'm going to go through a series of questions. But
Sure.
First of all, let's start with what amenities are important.
You know, I think that depends on the individual, because as we know, everybody's different. So in my community, which is a very high functioning independent living community, the residents here want to be able to do things that they did prior to moving here. Most of my residents are involved in cards or in volunteer groups or things of that nature. that continues here. So whether they have activities or things outside of the building that we can get them to, or whether they take place here, we try, when someone moves into an independent living community, we have an activities manager. So that person, before they even move in, is going to get a feel for what their interests are. We try to gear what goes on in our community around the interests of our residents. So that can change as people come and go, and some things never change. Food events, cards, and those kind of things are always very big.
How important is location?
Location is very important. For me, if, you know, I have lost both parents, but for the people that I work with, I have a lot of people out of state. So when we have those situations, that's why it's important to have a me in place so that I can help them navigate from far away. But for those who live local, it's imperative that they live between 5 to 10 minutes away from their loved one, because there are always emergencies. And as we age, we get frail, we get impaired cognitively, and we have needs for our loved ones, but we don't want to be a burden. And so a lot of times we, as the children, we have to be the ones to make that initiative with our family members and say, listen, we want to help you with this journey. They're not going to ask for help because, of course, nobody ever needs to move. They can age in place till they're 100 right in their apartment with stairs and clutter.
Alyssa, what about staffing?
That's one of the best questions to ask. And I tell people when they go in communities, and go in a lot, when you go in, I'm a very rare position in an independent living community. I'm a social worker. I'm a geriatric specialist. That's very rare to be in a community. It's usually a manager, a marketing person. So you really want to feel out your community. You want to see if it's independent, who's overseeing it. Talk to the residents that live there. When people tour my community, I ask them to speak to my residents, and I ask the families to. That's how you get the honest truth. So you go through communities, you want to make sure you talk to family members. If it's an assisted living situation or anything that requires more care, you want to go in and ask the longevity of your staff and management. These are important things because there are so many communities right now that are popping up everywhere. The turnover, and because of COVID, is enormous. So in our particular community, our management team, the longevity, I've been here 5 years. Most of us have been 5+. Those are important questions to ask because you want continuity when your loved one is moving to a community. There's enough stress. This is an emotional move. This should be the last move somebody makes. So we want to make sure we're making the proper decision and having the right staffing. If it's a memory care situation, you want to know what the ratio of staff to resident is. And that should be a very large ratio because that is the most impaired, and we want to make sure that there are people taking care of the people that we love.
What is the ideal ratio in memory?
It really depends on the number in your community. So our numbers clearly, because it's an aging population, changes. So let's hypothetically say we have 15 in my memory care right now. You're going to have a med tech. That med tech is the person who's going to be the med passer outer. So they're also a caregiver. So you're going to have that person. And if there are 15 people, we're probably going to have at least 4 caregivers in there at all times. And the most important part about memory care is having your residents out in your community and not, same with assisted living, but more so in memory care so that they're stimulated all day long. So it's most important that we have more staff in this part of our community so we have eyes and hands. And those are important questions to ask. I'm really glad you asked about that because people don't think about that.
Alyssa, what about medical care and availability of same?
Well, the wonderful thing about most communities in medical care, when families come in and meet with me and they have their primary care doctor that's been their doctor for 50 years that they don't want to change with, I say to them, this is the reality. Your kids live here. They go to Florida in the winter. We can make it very easy for you. So when people move to our community, we have services here and they can go on with our doctor so that they can come right to them. We can bring a foot doctor to them, dental. That's the whole part of moving to a community so that as you age and you're not able to drive or drive as much, we provide those services because as we know, doctor's appointments, are crucial in a senior's life. That's a lot of their activity. I hate to put it like that, but that is a socialization. We need to make sure they're being seen and their medical needs are being met. So we make that very easy for our residents. And most communities do have that.
It's important. I mean, I believe that there's a direct correlation between your age and the amount of time you spend going to doctors and dentists. I mean,
You know what? It's funny you say that, because on a daily basis, as people are walking by my office, it seems like everyone's going to the dentist today. Like everyone's going to the dentist. It's a very big thing when you age to go to the dentist. But the whole point of living here is to make life easier for you as you age.
Alyssa, what are some other important issues that we should be aware of in considering senior housing?
You know, because finances are so important, I tell children to work with their family members on the financial aspect, because what we see when people move into retirement communities such as mine, you run out of money. And so you want to make sure when you're moving to a community, it's a community that you can afford, and you have to figure long term, because we don't know how long somebody is going to age. So the financial aspect is really important, and to navigate that before it's an issue. Again, I always go back to having these conversations early, because we don't know what's going to happen, and we have to be most prepared. So I think that's truly like of things looking for, especially people that are looking to retire into a situation like this. It's best to meet with an elder. I always tell people there's elder care law attorneys out there. Figure out your finances and figure out your long-term situation before you actually start your search. And ideally having your kids help you with that, even though some people are a little stubborn, because when we're a little impaired, we don't always know how long our money's going to last. And that really is imperative to how we're going to live out the rest of our days, because we don't want to have to transition after moving one place and then disrupting someone's life, because cognitively that sets people back when we have to I mean, it's so psychologically upsetting for people to make a change to begin with. We don't want to have to repeat that.
Well, Lisa, we have an important tool at Gracefully Graying called Listing Life Fully, which really dovetails into all of these issues. It's a way to list finances and explore what can you do. It covers memory care issues. It covers so many things. So it's something to think about for anyone who's at that age or has family members where they should be sitting down. This is the way to do it, and do it on a gradual basis. Before we sign off, what are some other words of wisdom or advice that you would give regarding a search for the appropriate housing for a loved one?
Well, the first thing is, don't be afraid to ask someone who's been through this experience before, because your best knowledge is from friends or family members or others who have gone through this process. And it's very taxing. It's very emotional. So having people who have gone through it are going to be a huge asset to you. Reaching out to people like myself who are in the geriatric world, who are going to not sell you a product, but tell you what is going to be the best thing for your loved one and your family and their lifestyle. And be honest, because truthfully, at the end of the day, this is our family. And when we age, and we're all going to be in that situation, we do not want our children lying to us. We don't. We want to have those honest conversations with our kids now and tell them what we need as we age, because that is such a takeaway at this point in our life, because it is never too soon to have these conversations, as difficult as they are, and bring someone in if you need help.
Alyssa Tobias, thank you so much for being our guest.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is such an important conversation, and we've really covered a lot of points. And I know there are many, many more areas that I'd like to explore with you in further conversations. I want to thank you for watching. I want to thank our viewers, and please share and like this. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.